We live in this world that's just obsessed with doing it all at once, right? We're juggling emails during meetings, we're scrolling through our phones while we're trying to study, switching between like a dozen tabs just to get one thing done. And it feels like we're being super productive. But if we're so busy, why do so many of us end the day feeling totally wiped out, but not really like we've accomplished anything?
It's this weird paradox of modern life, isn't it? You feel like you're constantly on, moving a mile a minute, but that feeling of real, focused progress, it just feels like it's always out of reach. You're putting in all the hours, but the results, they just don't seem to match the effort.
Well, that exhaustion, it isn't just a side effect of a long day. It's basically the bill coming due for working in a way that is completely at odds with how our brains are actually wired to function. So let's break down exactly what that price is.
Okay, let's dive right in. The first and honestly, the most important thing to get your head around is that the whole idea of multitasking, at least as we think of it, it's a total myth. Our brains simply don't do it. And this quote right here, it just completely reframes the entire conversation. We're not processing multiple things at once, like a computer with a bunch of programs open. Nope. Our brains are doing something way less efficient. They're frantically jumping from one thing to the next and back again.
So let's put a proper name to it: task switching. This is the act of your brain's command center, the prefrontal cortex, having to disengage from one task and then completely reorient itself to a new one. I want you to think of it like a spotlight. It has to shut off, swing over to a new spot, and then power back on every single time you switch your attention. And here's the kicker. Every single one of those switches, every time you glance at a notification or click on a different tab, it isn't free. It comes with what scientists call a switch cost. And that's a very real penalty you pay in both time and mental energy. And that cost it's huge. Research from cognitive psychology shows that all this mental gear shifting can eat up to 40% of your productive time. Just think about that. Nearly half your effort isn't even going into the work itself. It's just lost in the act of switching between things. And when you see it visually, it's pretty stark. When we practice monotasking, just focusing on one thing at a time, our productivity is high. But the moment we start task switching, that productivity absolutely plummets. We think we're gaining efficiency, but we're actually actively losing it.
Now, this isn't just some abstract loss of office productivity. These cognitive costs have some serious, real-world consequences, all the way from how we learn in a classroom to how people perform in the most critical life or death situations.
Let's start with something we can all picture: the classroom. We've all seen it, right? Students with their laptops open, supposedly taking notes, but, they're also juggling messages and social media. So how much does that divided attention really mess with their ability to remember anything? Well, a recent study of university students gives us a super clear answer. The students who said they did very little multitasking scored on average a 4.2 out of 5 on memory tests. Pretty good. But as the amount of multitasking goes up, the scores just fall off a cliff. They go all the way down to a 2.5 for the students who multitask the most. The more you switch, the less you remember. It's really that simple. Okay, so that's a test score. But what happens when the stakes get really high? Take the medical field. This is a world where a moment of lost focus can be catastrophic. The constant interruptions and cognitive load are major contributors to doctor burnout. In fact, researchers found that 55% of physicians report symptoms of burnout, and that burnout more than doubles the chances of them making a medical error. The cost here isn't a bad grade. It could be a human life. So, with our brains feeling so overloaded and the consequences being so severe, it's really no surprise that a huge market has popped up promising a shortcut, right? A quick fix to get our focus back. And you start seeing products like this one, called the Genius Wave, getting a ton of attention. They're tapping right into that feeling we all have, that desire for a simple solution to this really complex problem of modern distraction. The core promise is incredibly compelling. Just listen to a short audio track every day, and it will supposedly use special sound frequencies to stimulate theta brainwaves, the ones linked to creativity and deep relaxation. The idea is that it'll just flip a genius switch in your brain for instant focus. So you have to ask, does a promise like that actually hold up? Let's try to separate what's scientifically plausible from what might just be clever marketing. All right, let's break it down. The claim of unlocking your genius instantly, yeah, that's obviously an exaggeration. But the science underneath it all, this idea of brainwave entrainment, is plausible.
There are some encouraging early studies on using sound to influence brain states. The reality, though, is that strong, consistent clinical proof for some kind of dramatic life transformation, well, it's just not there yet. It's also really important to be a critical consumer here. When you dig into these kinds of products, independent analyses often find a pattern of marketing red flags, things like fake celebrity endorsements, totally unrealistic claims about boosting your IQ overnight, and these high-pressure sales tactics. These aren't tools to inform you, they're tools to persuade you.
So what are the real-world results? Well, when you pull together a bunch of user reports, you get a very mixed bag. A pretty big chunk, somewhere around half, do report noticeable benefits, but it's mostly things like better focus and relaxation. Then you've got another large group who say the effects are really mild, and a sizable chunk who say they felt no meaningful change at all. So it's definitely not a guaranteed fix.
So if there's no magic bullet, no instant audio fix, what's the real solution? Well, the good news is that the very same science that explains the problem also points us directly to the answer. And here it is. It's actually that simple. The most powerful tool for productivity isn't a new app or some fancy audio track. It's an old-fashioned approach, monotasking. Just giving one complex thing your complete, undivided attention is and has always been the secret to doing high-quality work.
Now, getting your focus back isn't easy, but the steps are pretty straightforward. First, you have to intentionally practice single tasking. Block out real, uninterrupted time for your most important work. Second, try using a structured method like the Pomodoro technique to manage your focus and energy. Third, build a fortress against distraction. Silence those notifications. And finally, work on your metacognitive awareness. That's just the simple act of noticing when your mind has wandered and then gently guiding it back.
So the final takeaway is this. That feeling of being busy but not productive, it's not some personal failing. It's the natural result of living and working in a world that encourages constant distraction. By understanding the true cost of task switching, you can start to make different choices. So I'll leave you with this question. What could you really achieve with your undivided attention?